How do you structure a book? I want to talk about how I've done that with my 3 books. So the first book, this is called Path of the Freelancer. This is the first book I wrote, published it in 2017. The way I wrote this book originally was I essentially dumped out everything I knew about freelancing. I was a couple years, I guess 3 years. By the time I published it, it was 3 years in. But it took me about 18 months, about an hour a day of writing. And when I first wrote it, what I did is I just dumped everything I knew about freelancing in sort of a pile. And as I looked at that pile, I realized, for freelancers, they're focused on their work. They probably don't have time to read a book. So they're probably going to just read parts of it. Or if they're going to read it, they need to be able to get through it fast. They need to be able, really tangible, tactical, ways to tactical actions that they can take to move their freelancing business forward. So what I did is I started to reflect. I said, well, what's the structure of freelancing? And I started to think about it. And if you notice in the front of the book, I've got these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 numbers. And so I essentially identified 7 achievements, 7 things that a freelancer needs to do in order to sustain their freelancing, to succeed as a freelancer. And what I did is I took all that content that I created and I dumped it into those 7 groups. So now I had a structure. And then by identifying that structure, I was able to identify gaps, what was missing. And I ended up developing a substructure within those 8, which was 4 checkpoints. So achievements 2 through 8 all have 4 checkpoints. So they're broken into those 4 pieces. And the first achievement's a little bit different. But the interesting thing is the eighth one was not part of that initial structure. I ended up discovering that a little bit later as I had sort of evaluated the content that I created. So that's the first book. I vomited everything I had, and then I realized I needed a structure. So I created the structure, then I moved the content into that structure, and then I filled in the gaps. The second one, this is my book for small business owners. It's called The Jump, From Chaos to Clarity for Your Striving Small Business. I had a marketing company for about 7 years, and I ended up shutting it down. And I published this in 2019, so Path of the Freelancer came first. And funny enough, I didn't have a structure for this book. I didn't quite understand, I knew there were sort of 2 sections. There was the beginning, the first part, and then the second part. And the first part is a little bit telling my story. I own this marketing company, and it's really, this whole book is a letter to past me. If I were to go back in time before I started my marketing agency, this is what I would have given myself. This would have been my letter. But the funny thing is, if you notice, there's these 4 icons here. And when I was designing the cover, I was partway through the book and I designed the cover for the book. And I came up with these 4 icons just to make it interesting. And that was the catalyst to then figure out what are the 4 sections in the second part of the book that that those icons represent. So I'll read those real quick. So step 1, transform your business by leveling yourself up. Step 2, build a strong business foundation. Step 3, lead your dedicated team forward. And step 4, elevate your business with bulletproof systems and mental models. And so that's where the structure of that one came in. And this was a very different type of book. Path of the Freelancer was very much a very tactical, very clear, here's what you need to do. But with The Jump, really the challenge with The Jump, so if you notice in the back here, it says rebuild your entrepreneurial hopes and dreams. So with business owners, they hit a wall, I hit a wall, we hit a wall. And the only way to get past that is to level up, is to mature, it's to grow ourselves. We can't grow our business until we grow ourselves. So we end up being a leadership bottleneck. And so this book is a lot of stories. It's a lot of ways to dig into the entrepreneur that's reading it, for them to really evaluate things in a way that hopefully helps them think and grow through the process, so that by the time they're done with the book, they're a little bit different. And they're moving in a direction of personal growth, of which then they can lead their company. And I've recently gotten the first proof for my 3rd book. This is called From the Garden to the Cross. Very different than my first 2 books on freelancing and small business. This is a Christian book about Jesus's passion. And I've been working on this for 4 years. And the structure of this book was actually easy for me because it was given to me. I walk through when Jesus goes in the Garden of Gethsemane all the way to when he's crucified on the cross. And then I go back and do a little bit of the Last Supper, the farewell discourse. So I essentially took the story and I broke it into sections. And then I mapped it out. And then I essentially started writing the content, which was really great because this book has been so difficult. You notice how fat it is. This has taken me 4 years, where Path of Freelancer took me 18 months. And I think The Jump was about either 18 to 24 months. And so this is, I expected this one to take as long as those, but it ended up being twice as long. And the structure was given to me. And I'm grateful for that because everything else has been so difficult. So as you think about your book and the way to structure it, I think it's helpful to understand who your audience is and what you're trying to convey to them, and what's the structure that you can give it to them. And then it also really comes down to what type of book you're creating. So if you have questions, post them in the comments below.